All right, well, today we're going to hear from Rick Grafagna of Senior Solutions. He's going to talk to us about senior housing. This is a basic, like getting started kind of presentation. I know from personal experience that if you have a family member who is growing older and perhaps needs more assistance, this can be kind of an overwhelming topic. So Rick is here to shed some light on it for us. So you can get started whenever you are ready.
I'm ready to go. Hello, everybody. My name is Rick Grafagna, as Megan said. Megan, thank you very much for allowing me to be here and present. Topic today is senior housing. Whoops, what happened?
Should just be able to start the slideshow. Yeah.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so we're gonna start out with a humorous story. I hope you think it's humorous. I am kind of sensitive, so I appreciate you laughing one way or the other. So there was this, can they hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm getting positive feedback so far.
Okay.
Let us know at any point if you lose audio.
Good. So there's a group of senior citizens on a bus trip. They were going on an excursion downtown to visit one of the museums. They had left and they had been on the road for a little bit, and one of the female attendee walked up to approach the driver of the bus and asked him if he cared for some peanuts. He said, sure. So he reached out his hand, he gave him some peanuts and he munched them down. A little while later, same woman approached the bus driver and asked him the same thing, if he liked the peanuts. He said, sure, that'd be great. So this happened like 3 or 4 more times. Finally, the bus driver said, you know, I really enjoy the peanuts, but I don't want to eat all of your good peanuts. And she said, well, that's okay. They're too hard on our teeth. We can't eat them. And he goes, well, you don't mind me asking, you know, if they're too hard on your teeth, why would you spend your good money on peanuts? She said, well, we really enjoy the chocolate on the outside. But oh, so let's jump right in. Before we get going, though, I would encourage questions. So if you're online, you want to unmute yourself and ask a question or put a question into chat. Feel free. If I happen to say something that you didn't understand, you have a follow-up question, I really appreciate the question. So what is going on here? All right, we're here. Okay, here we go. So there are a variety of retirement financial models. So the first one we want to speak to is buy-in. Are you familiar with buy-in? Have you heard that term before? Any idea what that means to you?
You pay so much to live there.
Yeah.
A lump sum.
Yeah, it's a lump sum. So a buy-in community, in order to gain entry or access to that property, is going to require a significant transfer of funds, some level of a 6-figure amount. Could be a couple $100,000. I've seen as high as $600,000 and $700,000. It's not a real estate transaction. You're not getting a title or a deed to a piece of property. You're merely gaining access to that community and what it has to offer. So some of the things that are associated with a buy-in, there might be a percentage, might be a 70%, might be 80%, might be 90% buy-in. And what that means is that would be the amount of money that would be returned to you yourself or to your estate at the time that you leave that property. Okay, so let's say it's a $300,000 buy-in and it's a 90% buy-in. At that particular time, when you leave, you would have $270,000 coming back to either you personally or to your estate and your beneficiaries. One of the key things about this part of the program is to understand the contract and what it may say relative to that distribution of funds, but sometimes there's some restrictions on it. It might say, well, you'll get the money within a certain period of time. It might say you'll get your money at the time that the apartment that you were living in is resold, if you will. So that could end up being a significant amount of time. So the devil's in the details. So it's good that you have an understanding of what all involved with that, distribution of your monies back to you. So what else do you get with a buy-in? You gain access to the other levels of care. It could be, priority access. So for example, if you need to transition into assisted living, you may go to the top of the list if there's not availability versus someone that may be coming from the outside. There could be financial inducements or benefits. There could be significant discounts for you versus someone that's not a buy-in resident moving through the various levels of care. There are plans that have locked-in fee that at the time you move in, you're guaranteed this rate per month fee, irregardless of, as you go through the other levels of care. Some plans have, safety net, could be a benevolent fund, or it could be what they call a life care plan, which essentially says that if at some point you no longer have the financial resources to pay the monthly fee, that benevolent fund or life care plan will kick in and allow you to stay living there. So it could be, a real, it's a safety net, if you will, to allow you to stay living there. Okay. As you might say, well, gee, how come, if I give you all this money up front, how come you think that I might run out of money at some point? Well, in addition to the buy-in, each month there's a monthly fee, depending on the size of the apartment, and the level of care that you're living in, there is a monthly fee that's associated that will continue irregardless of the buy-in that they made. Any questions?
Like, how much is that monthly fee approximately for?
Could be 2,000, it could be 5,000. It depends on, did you get the smallest apartment available or the largest 3-bedroom, 2-bed, it depends on the size of the apartment. Thanks for the question. Okay, so next, we want to talk a little bit about a community fee for a rental property. These types of properties have a much lower cost associated with what you need to gain entry or access to the community. It might be $2,500, it might be $3,500. And that gets you, it's a one-time only fee, non-refundable after you move in. And that again gets you into your apartment. It's a starting point. And those monies are typically used towards apartment refurbishment and maintenance of the common area grounds and things of that nature for that community. A lot of flexibility with this type of community. You're going to sign a rental agreement. It might look like a 12-month apartment lease, but it's different than your typical market rate type of apartment. In senior housing, you've got flexibility. If you're in assisted living and you can give a 30-day notice, and then you can leave that apartment without any financial repercussions. Okay, so you're not obligated to stay in that apartment. Whereas if you get a more traditional market type rate apartment, you moved in June and you decide in December that you want to leave, the landlord's going to say, well, that's great, you can leave, but you owe me rent, until the following June because of the lease arrangement that we have. In terms of numbers of properties, there are a significant more number of rental type properties than there are buy-in type of community properties that are out there. Okay. Then last, I want to talk just briefly about low income or affordable housing. These are properties that are senior housing. They are typically independent style apartments. There may or may not be any services available, so you really are independent. There may be a program or activity through the course of the month, typically come with full kitchens, no meal plan. The rents, depending on the type, whether it's a Section 8 or it might be a HUD type of a property, your rent could be a function of the percentage of your income, or if you have a voucher, that can be used to offset the rent, but it's typically less than market rate rents for that type of apartment. The challenge with affordable housing is supply and demand. supply is at a low ebb and demand is very high. So typically, there's a significant waiting list for these types of properties. Any questions? We good? Okay. So now, what different types of retirement housing community? Excuse me, like I get a little drink. Let's talk about independent living. So independent living is apartment style senior housing. Could be a studio, could be a 1-bedroom, could be a 2-bedroom apartment. The apartment comes unfurnished. You bring your own furniture and your own accessories and whatnot to decorate it as you wish. Typically come with a full kitchen. Your base rent gets you housekeeping and maintenance and utilities and programming and activities, gets you a meal plan. A meal plan is something less than 3 meals a day. It might be 1 meal a day. It could be breakfast and dinner. Sometimes I've seen breakfast and lunch and or dinner served restaurant style in the dining room. But you've got a full kitchen in your apartment to help supplement, whatever meals are not available in the dining room. Your apartment may have a long washer dryer inside the apartment, or you're going to have easy access to laundry facilities real close to the apartment. You have activities, programming and activities, local transportation if that's needed. There are doctors that come into the building. There's home health that's available to provide physical therapy and whatnot if you need. Typically, the only extra cost outside of your base rent might be for a landline phone. Typically, like I said, utilities and Wi-Fi and cable and the like are always included with the rents. If there's 2 people moving in, a husband and wife moving into the apartment, they don't double the rent for 2 people, but for that second person, there's what they call a second person fee, which is significantly less than the rent, but is really more like a cost of food in order to live in the apartment. Okay. Next, independent living with services. So you're living in senior housing, you've got your independent living apartment, you're real happy, and life throws you a curveball. Let's say that all of a sudden you're feeling a little unsteady on your feet and a little uncomfortable stepping into and out of a shower. Well, you can bring services in to help with that particular situation. It might be a caregiver that's supplied by the community itself for a fee. It might be a caregiver that you bring in from outside, to provide that service. Another example, let's say you injure your shoulder. You're having a little trouble getting dressed in the morning and undressed at the end of the day. So maybe have somebody come in the morning for a half hour and at the end of the day for a half hour to help with that. That could be a great way to extend the amount of time you stay in your independent living apartment. This works as long as the help that you need can be scheduled. You can schedule a bath, you can schedule a shower rather, you can schedule getting dressed and undressed at the start of the end of the day. You can schedule mobility assistance to get from your apartment to the dining room for meals. Those are all schedulable events. Okay. And that can make it work well in that apartment. Now let's say the type of help that you need becomes more frequent and a little bit more extensive, more bordering on the line of 24/7 that you're never quite sure when you're going to need help. Then maybe you need to think about transitioning to an assisted living apartment. So the bathing and the showering and the assistance with getting dressed, those fall under the umbrella of what we call activities of daily living, or ADLs. Things like showering and toileting assistance and medication reminders and mobility support and things of that nature are all under the umbrella of activities of daily living. And those can all be effectively addressed in an assisted living apartment. Now, your assisted living apartment in many cases could be in the same building that your independent living apartment is. Could be a floor that's been converted to assisted living. It could be a wing. In some cases, it might be a separate building on the property that provides assisted living. Again, it's apartment style living. Could be a studio, could be a 1 bedroom, could be a 2 bedroom. Looks and feels a lot like your independent living apartment. One of the differences is more than likely it's going to include a kitchenette versus a full kitchen. So it's going to have a countertop, cabinets, a refrigerator, a sink, a microwave, but not a full kitchen. The reason you don't have a full kitchen is that the base rent in assisted living includes 3 meals a day, unlike the independent living apartments. Includes all the other things, housekeeping, maintenance. It also includes laundry being done for you, but cable, Wi-Fi, utilities, activities and programming, transportation, excuse me, all of those things are included in assisted living. So typically, assisted living, there's 2 pieces to the cost equation. There's the base rent, which gets you everything that I just described. Then there's the cost of care. Cost of care is determined after an evaluation and an assessment of a potential resident, by the director of nursing of the property, who's going to come in and evaluate you and put a care plan together and determine what are all of the needs that you have in order to get through the day safely. Do you need medication management? You need help with toileting. You need help with showering. Some people need a lot of help. Some people just need a little bit of help. Some people don't need any help. They just want to be in assisted living for that support that's potentially around them. And so that care plan, if you will, then is translated into a monthly fee, which is added to the rent to come up with what the monthly cost would be for you to live there. Any questions so far? Megan, anything out in the world of internet?
Not that I see. So I'm assuming that the fee then obviously would be higher for people who need more
Yes.
support. Yes.
For sure. So, an average range is if someone needs some help, it might be as little as $250 or $500 a month. I've seen maximum care up to like maybe $2,500 or $3,000 a month for somebody needing a lot of help. Okay. A lot of services in assisted living. I mentioned earlier, there's physical therapy in the therapy agency, so you can get physical therapy, occupational therapy, while you're in the building, typically paid for by Medicare. There's doctors that are there, could be gerontologists, could be psychologists, audiologists. There's podiatrists that routinely come in the property, to do to make sure people's feet are in good shape. Access to medical appointments via transportation. So, there's a lot of services that are available. Beauty salons, you don't ever have to leave to get your hair done. So typically beauty salons are on site. Assisted living can handle a lot of care, short of skilled nursing, which we're going to touch on in a few minutes, but up to and including hospice level care. So assisted living licensed properties can be end of life propositions for people, bringing hospice in to help with that, at the end of life's journey. So after assisted living, we have memory care. Okay, so now memory care options, there's really two of them. There are memory care properties that are standalone, that they are separate buildings, that's all that they do, that's their specialty. And then you have memory care options that are part of your independent and assisted living community. Again, it could be a separate building, it could be a wing, it could be a floor on the property that's devoted to memory care. So if someone has dementia, oftentimes I'll get this question from families. Gee, we just left mom's doctor and they said that mom has early onset dementia, so we need to find a memory care option for her. Well, not necessarily. Okay, there are many people that are living successfully in assisted living and don't necessarily need to transition to memory care as of yet. Okay, so a memory care unit is different than assisted living. It's apartment style living. Typically, there are studios. Okay, oftentimes they don't have the kitchenette. It's a studio, a room for your bed and a nightstand and a TV and a bathroom and restroom facilities. Typically for safety reasons, they may not have the kitchenette in there. And they're smaller units because oftentimes, the residents are not spending a lot of time in their apartment. They're going to be out and about, mingling with the other residents, participating as much as they can with activities and programs. Memory care units are typically secured, so that someone can't gain access either into the area or out of the area, because they might be what we consider flight risks or exit seeking. And that's usually one of the deal breakers. If someone has dementia and they're living in assisted living and they start showing tendencies to be exit seeking, well, that's usually the reason that they have to migrate from assisted living into memory care. The programming, the activities in memory care are very different than what you would see in assisted living. They're designed to help the residents feel successful. They're a little bit less complex, simpler, maybe less size of groups are much smaller. Instead of maybe having an activity for 30 or 40 people, it might be an activity for 5 to 10 people to help keep them engaged and active and feel like they're actually able to participate successfully. The employees in memory care, especially trained, not only just to become a caregiver in the dementia unit, but there's additional training that takes place. So they know how to work with people that maybe exhibit some behaviors, and so that they know how to redirect people that may, show some tendency to be a little aggressive behaviors. Okay, and that's memory care. Any questions? So, have you heard this term before? Continuing Care Retirement Community, or CCRC? So a CCRC is a senior complex, if you will, that has independent living with services, assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing, all on the same campus. Typically, your CCRC is associated with a buy-in type of property. Supportive living.
Oh, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Is Monarch Landing a CCRC? Are you familiar with Monarch Landing?
Yeah, excellent example. Absolutely, yes. So supportive living, probably a lot of people have not heard of this. Supportive living is senior housing. It's a program unique to the state of Illinois. Ages 65 years on up, apartment style living. Could be a studio, could be a 1-bedroom. Very similar to an independent living apartment. It's unfurnished. You bring your own furnishings and belongings. Comes with a kitchenette and not a full kitchen. The base rent gets you housekeeping and maintenance and laundry and 3 meals a day and activities and programming. Residents that are in supportive living have to have a minimum mobility requirement. They need to be able to stand and to pivot on their own, even if it's to get to a walker or to a wheelchair. Essentially, they need to be able to navigate the apartment so that they can get to the restroom to take care of their toileting needs. There's care available for residents, similar to independent living with services. As long as the care that they need can be scheduled, then you can be appropriate to stay living in supportive living. So assistance with showering, assistance with mobility to get to the dining room for a meal, assistance with getting dressed in the morning and undressed at the end of the night. So really sounds like senior housing, right? Well, there's a big difference with supportive living. Independent living, assisted living, memory care, your CCRCs, These are private pay only options. Okay? Supportive living, you can start out by paying privately, but if at some point you don't have the capacity to pay that monthly fee, you can apply for and transition to Medicaid, and Medicaid will become the payer for you and allow you to continue living in supportive living.
So we have another question online. How do we look for supportive living facilities specifically? So how do you know if a facility is a supportive living facility?
Well, there are websites. There's a website that you can search by county to tell you which properties are considered supportive living. Or I'm gonna give my contact information at the end of the presentation, and you can contact me, and I can share what I know about it. Any other questions about supportive living? Okay. So affordable senior housing, spoke to this already a little bit. The big key with affordable senior housing, given the shortage of supply, don't be alarmed with the length of the wait list that you may run into. You might see a year, you might see 2 years of a wait list. My guidance is to at least go through the process of filling out the paperwork and getting on the wait list. The clock doesn't start ticking for you until you're on that wait list. So even though the wait list may sound like it's really extensive, what you don't know is that an apartment may become available and they may reach out to 35 people that are on that wait list, and they all go, not the right time, changed our mind, dad passed away, no matter what the story might be, all of a sudden you go through a long list of people and you may just be lucky enough that they get to you. Okay, so my encouragement with affordable senior housing is to at least get on the list if that seems like a viable option. Skilled nursing. People go to skilled nursing for a number of reasons. One would be short-term for some rehabilitation. You go to the hospital, you slipped and fell, you injured your hip, maybe you have surgery on your hip. You've been in the hospital for 3 midnights. You're eligible for Medicare to pay for your short-term rehab. You go to skilled nursing for a short period of time. Get some intensive physical therapy and occupational therapy to get you at least back to improve your strength and your mobility. So, you happen to know how many days you're eligible for rehab by Medicare?
90,
100 days, actually.
100.
You're eligible for 100 days. But very little chance that you're ever going to get to that 100 days. When I first started in this business about 12 years ago, I would say the average length of stay for someone coming out of the hospital, going to rehab before they go home again was about 55 days. Okay, that they would be eligible for, that they would use. Want to take a guess how long it is now?
Probably 30.
I wish it was still 30. It's more like 15 days.
Really?
So what do you think? The people today that are coming out of the rehab after 15 days, what kind of condition do you think they are compared to someone 9 years ago that had 50 days? They're probably in worse shape, right? So that really puts a burden on the family, to help get mommy and or dad back to the point where they can, potentially live independently. So people are in skilled nursing for rehab. Sometimes people are in skilled nursing long-term. That becomes their new home. Assisted living can manage a lot of things that people are facing, but some maladies that have to be addressed in skilled nursing are things like on a feeding tube, a respirator, a ventilator, maybe they're a bariatric, and maybe they're a 3 or 4 person assist. They got a stage 3 or 4 wound. Those types of maladies have to be addressed in skilled nursing. They can't be addressed in assisted living. And another reason someone might be in skilled nursing long-term would be, remember going back to supportive living? Well, if all of a sudden someone needs 24/7 care, or there's some other issues going on that they're no longer appropriate to live in supportive living, and they don't have the funds to live in assisted living and pay privately, they would need to continue on Medicaid and find a long-term skilled nursing property that'll accept Medicaid. That becomes their new home. Any questions? We good? So, as you're searching for housing, some key items to consider. Location is always right near the top of the list, right? People want to stay close to perhaps the home that they've lived in for 50 or 60 years. That's where their doctors are, that's where their family is, that's where their friends are. Very familiar, right? Sometimes location is different than that. Maybe you've lived where you were at for many, many years, but guess what? Your friends aren't here anymore, your kids aren't here anymore, so now maybe you need to go somewhere closer to where the family is. Or, let's say 35 years ago, you picked up stakes and you moved to Florida. Well, now life's changed. You're down in Florida, you start to need a lot of help, and the kids are saying, come on back north, closer to us, so you got your support network and your safety network in place. But location is always important. Level of care that you need is key, right? What do they have to offer? I sometimes have families approach me about mom or dad wanting to move into an apartment, and they say, well, we got this great apartment building, it's independent living, we're going to move mom and dad there. Well, mom and dad are 88 and 89, and maybe going to a property that only has independent living, even though that's what they need right now, might not be the greatest of ideas. You know, maybe they need to go somewhere where there's assisted living and other services readily available. Maybe mom is showing signs of early onset dementia, right? So instead of going somewhere that only has independent living and assisted living, you maybe want to move somewhere where the memory care component is available, so that if and when that becomes necessary, that level of service is available to them. Lifestyle and amenities. What do they do for fun? You're going here to live, right? You know, so what kind of activities do they do? What kind of programs do they offer? What kind of events? Do they go downtown to go see the theater and to see movies? Do they go out to restaurants periodically, you know, to dine? You know, what kind of activities do they have? They have a pickleball league, you know, do they have access to a pickleball court, you know, to keep yourself busy and active? Cost, obviously cost is a factor. You want to understand not only what the costs are today, but maybe get a glimpse. So let's say you're moving into an independent living apartment. Assisted living, you're not ready for yet, but maybe just get a look at what that assisted living pricing looks like today, just so that you can pencil those numbers on the back of an envelope, just so you have an idea from a budgeting standpoint what that might look like. Who likes to eat? I hope everybody online raises their hand, because I know everybody likes to eat. So the food in senior housing, quite honestly, is pretty darn good. Okay, it's cooked from scratch, on site. The menus change and you know, on a weekly basis. Residents have strong inputs and opinions on the food. Hey, the new meatloaf wasn't so great. Go back to the old meatloaf. Or, you know, here, I've got a goulash recipe from my grandmother that I'd like you to try. So residents have big input on the food. Kind of touch on this, on the activities and the outings, but the last bullet, local transportation, that can be very important. If you've given up driving, what kind of transportation access do they have options for you? Can you get to your medical appointments? You have to rely on your kids to get you there. You know, let's say, you know, now, you know, you're on dialysis and you need to get somewhere 3 days a week for your dialysis treatments. You know, are they going to be able to provide that transportation for you? So that'd be key to understand what that is for you. Staffing levels. Good question to ask when you're visiting properties are all the caregivers and the staff in the building your employees, or do you have to rely on staffing agencies to supplement, to get you to the level that you need to provide the staffing that's required to maintain, the residents that are here. Ask how long the key members of the team have been there. How long has the executive director been in place? The director of nursing, the sales and marketing person that you're speaking to, but that can kind of speak a little bit to the culture, the stability of the team, should be something that you should be familiar with. As soon as you start pulling the parking lot of a property you're going to visit, inspect those buildings, the common areas in the building, the parking lot in good shape. This time of the year is a landscaping well manicured. As you're walking through the building, is the common areas well lit, the carpeting in good shape, have the walls been painted recently and refreshed. This is potentially your new home, right? So you want that to be in good shape because you're going to be giving them your hard-earned money in order to live there. Oh, darn. Megan, how did food get in there? Tell me what the type in there. That was my mistake.
Speaks to its importance.
Yeah. Security and safety, what are the open hours of the building in terms of the front end concierge? Typically, now that we're kind of in our post-pandemic world, you can come and go in senior housing whenever it's convenient for you. There may be times when the front doors are locked, but there are ways to get in and out. You may have your own fob. There may be a phone number for you to call the nursing or whoever caregivers that are on staff to gain you access into the building. Ask what kind of emergency weather preparedness they have. What do they do? Do they do tornado drills? What happens in the case of severe weather? Financial stability. Not bad question to ask. Who the name on the front of the building isn't necessarily the money that built the building, right? So you may want to have a question and do some research about the financial stability. A little bit for the rental communities, but definitely for your CCRC buy-in properties. Some people may be familiar with Friendship Village in Schaumburg. Well, they filed bankruptcy about a month and a half ago. So even a place that's been around for as long as they have, with the name reputation that they have, a strong brand, obviously they're going through some financial difficulties, to try to understand what that's all about. And, this kind of ties back to the level of care. This is a big move. If you're coming from the home that you've lived in for many, many years and raised your kids and lots of memories, this is a big move, both physically and emotionally. You want to make sure that where you're going, that you're really comfortable and that maybe you're going to be there for, maybe this is your next and last move, but you need to think in terms of what they have to offer to address that. So, any questions before we move on? We good?
Good so far.
Okay. So everybody's still awake, can you tell?
I have no way of knowing.
No way of knowing that? Okay. So when is the right time to move? I'm gonna put all of these up here right away. This is a question that gets posed to me periodically by primarily adult children as they're wrestling with life's changes for their parents. It'll vary a lot from one situation to the next. That middle bullet really speaks a lot. Safety really comes into play with just about every situation and what may be driving the impetus to make a move. I often will tell families that if you're having trouble sleeping at night, you're waking up in the middle of the night wondering if dad successfully navigated from the bedroom to the bathroom, back to the bedroom safely without falling, it might be time to start thinking about, doing something else to protect his safety. Family geography, we talked about the Florida to here situation. Time to get mom and dad maybe closer so it's easier for you guys to provide, family to provide the support that they need. And cost, we're going to talk a little bit about home care in the home. I am a strong proponent of people staying at home as long as possible. My mom is 94, still living in the original house up in Elgin, right? So I'm living it. But I also know that we're just a phone call away from life changing. And sometimes that cost to maintain that home can be pretty expensive relative to the cost of assisted living. And medical diagnosis, right? The doctor may finally, have that heart-to-heart talk with his patient and go, Dolores, you really shouldn't be home. You should not go back home again. Now's the time to do something different. So, what type of payments are accepted? Private pay, Medicaid and public aid. Anybody remember where Medicaid and public aid comes in? You remember there's two different ways that Medicaid can pay for someone to live long term. One is supportive living, and the other is skilled nursing, long term. Medicare. Didn't talk specifically about Medicare. Sometimes I get, families will, mostly the adult kids will say, well, gee, does Medicare help pay for any of this? Well, unfortunately, no. Okay, Medicare doesn't pay for care in the home. Medicare doesn't pay for long-term housing. Medicare's role doesn't change. So if you're in your home and Medicare is paying for hospitalization and rehabilitation, prescription drugs, and your doctor's visits and all of that, and you move from your single-family domestic house to assisted living, Medicare is still there. Medicare is going to continue playing the same role, paying for the same things that it always did. So how do I fund these payments? Social Security income. Pension, if you're the benefactor of working for a company that provides a pension. Savings and investments, that'll vary from person to person. I remember I was working with a gentleman several years ago. I was there with a social worker, and we were visiting him in his home in Elmhurst. And she was really probing. I mean, she was digging deep, trying to find out what the financial situation was. And come to find out, the house was paid for and worth about $350,000, had a healthy income of $5,500. Had a Cadillac long-term care insurance policy. And then she said, well, do you have any money set aside, any savings or, things of that nature? He goes, yeah. And she goes, well, about how much was that? He goes, I don't, he goes, maybe 1.8, $1.9 million, set aside. And she says to him, well, boy, are you lucky. And he didn't blink an eye, looked right back at her and said, luck had nothing to do with it. It was all part of his life plan, right? So if you were in a position to be able to set money aside, now's the time to use it. Proceed from the sale of your house. You're in your house, the mortgage has been paid for. You've got a nice a lump sum of equity available to you. Now's the time to use it to help pay for your own healthcare needs. Any chance you have a long-term care policy? No policy. Typically, people don't. I mean, if I'm in a group of 20, there's maybe 2 or 3 people that have long-term care insurance. But if you do have long-term care insurance, that can be used specifically to pay for senior housing. Virtually every property that I know of will accept, long-term care insurance. And for those that are online, if you have a policy and you haven't looked at it for a long time, find a drawer where you kept it, pull it out, refamiliarize yourself with what the benefit is so you understand what that is. Veterans benefits. If you're a veteran yourself or honorably discharged, if you're a surviving spouse of an honorably discharged veteran that served during a time of war, there's a benefit called aid and attendance, which is a monthly stipend. For a surviving spouse, it's about $1,500 a month. For a surviving, for a veteran, it could be, I think it's like $2,200 or $2,300 a month that can be used for home care and for long-term housing. Sometimes you can tap into that equity in your house, lines of credit or bridge loans. If you happen to have a whole life policy, life insurance policy, excuse me, you've accumulated some cash, that cash value or some policies can be converted into a form of a long-term care insurance policy. But that's the extent of what I know about it. Talk to your insurance broker. Well, sometimes rely on the kids, but that, in my particular case, they're not gonna be able to help. So, other items of importance, we touched on veterans benefits. There are also, if you're a veteran of the military, served at whatever time, you know, you could be eligible for up to 12 hours of in-home care, which I don't think a lot of people recognize or know. Sometimes there are some estate planning or elder law issues that an attorney can come in to help. Hopefully, everybody has power of attorney in place, both for property and for healthcare. If you don't have a power of attorney in place, I would highly encourage that you get one. Talked about that already a little bit. Real estate services. You got the house, you want to sell it, but you don't know anybody that can help you with that. A lot of wonderful agencies out there to help. Who's got stuff at home? I got stuff at home, right? So that could be pretty overwhelming. A lot of great companies out there that can help take care of the stuff. You know, downsizing services, they can help reduce the amount of things that you have, because what you have in your house aren't going to fit into your apartment, okay, in senior housing. So they will help you navigate through that. They can help with the move, they can help with the packaging, packing. It's just something that you don't have to feel so overwhelmed with and have that be a reason that you're not doing something, because there's companies that can help you with that. In-home care. A lot of wonderful agencies out there that can provide help, non-medical assistance in the home. They really focus on the activities of daily living that we talked about before. These are caregivers that work for licensed agencies, licensed by the state of Illinois. They're their employees, they're W-2 employees. They've got general liability and workers' compensation insurance taken out on them, so you're protected from a liability standpoint. They've been trained, they've been background checked. They can help with all the personal care needs that someone may have. They can also just be basic companions. They can be there to run errands. They can do light housekeeping and meal preparation and shopping and things of that nature. So they just can't do things that are considered medically invasive. So they can't give physical therapy. They can't administer medication, things of that nature, draw blood, take temperature, things of that nature. But they can do a lot outside of that. Adult day services, you know, just about every community has at least one of these organizations in place, and they're wonderful. I mean, they can be a great outlet to have mom or dad go spend the day, be with other seniors, get lunch, have activities and programming, you know, to keep them stimulated and active, you know, as much as possible. So, how do you go about locating these communities? You can do the looking yourself. You rely on input from your family and friends. You heard of Google? You go on Google and do some internet searching. There are also some senior related websites that are out there. There's some online senior placement agencies. And then there's some local senior placement companies like Senior Solutions. So 30-second commercial on my business. So my company is Senior Solutions. I consider myself somewhat of a matchmaker. I help connect families to senior housing, to home care, to a lot of the issues that we spoke about today. I try to connect them with the options that make the most sense based off of what their circumstances are. My services are free. I've been helping families for almost 12 years now. I love what I do. I love listening to the stories and helping people understand what their options are and problem solving. So you're saying to yourself, well, gee, he's no cost. You must be really rich. Well, I wish I was. My name is Rick, but I'm not rich, right? But, so my fees and my compensation flows on a referral basis. So if you were to honor me with allowing me to help you, and ultimately you moved into a property that I connected you with, that property would compensate me on a referral basis. And so that's my company, my phone number, my website. And I say this in all honesty. If you have any questions about anything that I spoke to today, or if you want to follow up 6 months from now, I encourage you to do that. Literally, there's no cost. If you have questions, I mean, you could beat the heck out of me with questions and answers. I'm not going to generate an invoice for you. Okay, I'm happy to help explain what the options are and to get you, from point A to point B. If you're in a better place after our conversation, I'm happy to do that. So, questions? Any questions from you?
For the use of the military thing, I know my husband was, Air National Guard, that doesn't.
I'm not sure. I don't think so, but we can confirm that. I mean, I can connect you with somebody that can answer that question. But, yeah, potentially there's something there.
So.
Yep.
Now, DuPage, county services today, do they work with anything?
So the case, so whether it's local area agency on aging or DuPage County Senior Services, they've got access to different services like maybe Meals on Wheels, and sometimes they can provide some support for some home services, things of that nature. That it'd be good to either go to their website or give them a call, depending on what the need is. A lot of the things that they provide are great. It's sometimes on a financial need basis, so depending on income and assets, they may or may not be able to help.
Well, thank you so much for coming out. I think
You're
this is important information to give to people. Like I said, if you have any other questions, don't be afraid to reach out to us.
Sounds good. Everybody have a great evening.